Mom, you're just like my abusive father, my daughter screamed. Give me the money, or you'll never see your granddaughter again. Her words still echo in my ears. Even now, I can't shake them, and my mind drifts back to last Thursday, the day when everything still smelled of cinnamon and felt almost safe. A grandchild's love is supposed to be a gift, a pure and simple joy that warms the autumn of your life. It's not supposed to be a weapon. It was never meant to be used as leverage. I never truly understood that until Jessica, my own daughter, taught me the brutal difference. My tragedy didn't begin with a bang, but with the scent of cinnamon and the rustle of old photographs on a sun-drenched afternoon. If I close my eyes, I can still feel the warmth of that day, still believe in the illusion of the peace I thought I had built. My house, a sturdy two-story colonial in a quiet Charlotte suburb, has always been my sanctuary. It smelled of lemon polish, old books, and whatever I was baking that day on that particular afternoon. It was snickerdoodles, Lily's favorite. The afternoon sun slanted through the living room windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air like tiny fairies. This was our Thursday ritual. I'd pick up my 11-year-old granddaughter, Lily, from school, and we'd have the house to ourselves for 3 golden hours before her mother came to get her. Grandma. Lily's voice was a melodious chime. Is this you? She held up a faded photograph of a young woman with a shy smile and hair teased high in a way no one had worn it for 40 years. That's me, I chuckled, my voice a little raspy with emotion. The day before my high school graduation, we were working on a memory box for her history class, a project I was probably more excited about than she was. My living room floor was a sea of my life's moments, sepia-toned pictures of my parents, Polaroids of a younger me with my ex-husband, Richard, and countless photos of Jessica growing up. From a gap-toothed toddler to a sullen teenager, Lily traced the outline of my face in the picture. You were pretty. You think so? I nudged her gently. I think you look just like her. Her face lit up with a genuine, unforced smile, a smile that was becoming rarer these days. For that one moment, everything felt right. The house was quiet, filled only with the soft crinkle of old paper and the gentle ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. This was my purpose, my joy. This small, bright girl was the anchor of my world. The spell was broken by the sound of a key in the front door. A wave of something I refused to name, a subtle, anxious tension crept into the room, chilling the warm air. We're in the living room. Honey, I called out. Jessica swept in, not like a daughter coming home, but like a performer making an entrance. She was dressed in a crisp, white blazer and jeans that were artfully ripped. Her phone, as always, was clutched in her hand like a lifeline. She exuded an aura of curated success, one I knew was as fragile as the vintage teacups on my mantelpiece. Oh, what a mess, she said, though she was smiling. She surveyed the scattered photos on the floor, her eyes not seeing memories, but clutter. Hi, sweetie. She bent to kiss the top of Lily's head. A fleeting, almost automatic gesture. Mom, you're a lifesaver. My last meeting ran super late. I knew her meetings were mostly held in coffee shops with her laptop, but I just smiled. It's no trouble. We were just finding a picture of me for the memory box. Perfect, Jessica said, her gaze drifting around the room, appraising it. This house is so solid, so much space. There it was, the subtext that always hummed beneath her words. My stability was a constant reminder of her lack of it. Her life, documented in perfect, sun-drenched squares on Instagram, was a carefully constructed fantasy. A fantasy I was almost single-handedly financing. The rent check bounced again. Mom, the landlord is being a total jerk. Lily's tablet broke, and she needs it for school. Can you help? My car is making that noise again. The requests were a constant, gentle current pulling at the edges of my retirement savings. 2 years ago, I had made my biggest mistake. I'd co-signed the lease on her trendy uptown apartment, a place far beyond her means. Richard, my ex-husband, had always warned me, "Carol, your heart is going to be your downfall." Jessica knows exactly which buttons to push. He was a cold man in many ways, but he had been brutally perceptive about our daughter. I'd ignored him then, convincing myself that ensuring my granddaughter had a roof over her head was a grandmother's duty, not a financial risk. Now, that signed piece of paper felt like a chain around my ankle. "Did that brand collaboration you were excited about come through?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light as I began gathering the photos. Jessica sighed. A theatrical puff of air. "They decided to go with a younger influencer. It's so ageist. Honestly, if I just had a little capital to properly invest in my brand, to hire a real photographer." She let the sentence hang in the air. A baited hook. I didn't bite. I couldn't. Not this time. My savings were finite, a fact Jessica seemed to find inconvenient. She herded Lily towards the door. A whirlwind of manufactured urgency. "Come on. Bug. We've got to get home for dinner and you have homework." At the door, she turned and gave me a quick, dry hug. Her perfume was expensive, but the hug felt cheap. "Thanks again for everything. Mom. You really are the glue that holds us all together." I stood at the door and watched them get into her sleek, leased SUV, another expense I knew she was struggling with. As they drove away, the silence of my house settled back around me, but it was different now. The warmth was gone. The quiet no longer felt peaceful, it felt empty. I walked back into the living room and saw one photograph lying face down on the Persian rug. I picked it up. It was of me, Jessica, and Lily, taken at the beach last summer. In the photo, we were all smiling, but looking at it now, I could see the truth. Lily's smile was real. Mine was hopeful. And Jessica's didn't quite reach her eyes. A cold knot formed in my stomach. It was the familiar, creeping dread that fate was knocking on my door, and I was too afraid to answer it. The uneasy feeling from that Thursday afternoon clung to me like the damp chill of a coming storm. I tried to shake it off, attributing it to the melancholy of digging through the past. I busied myself with gardening, with my book club, with the small, orderly routines that had defined my life since retirement. I tried to believe that the foundation of my family was as solid as the old oak tree in my front yard. But I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that a tremor was coming. It arrived the following Tuesday, not with a roar, but with the cheerful, unassuming chime of my phone. "Hi. Mom, got a minute?" Jessica's voice was bright, effervescent. It was the voice she used for her online followers, bubbly and full of promise. My guard, which had been on high alert for days, foolishly lowered itself. "Of course. Honey. I was just about to water the hydrangeas. How's Lily?" "She's great. She's FaceTiming with a friend," Jessica said quickly, dispensing with the pleasantries. "Listen, the reason I'm calling is, I have the most incredible news. An opportunity has come up that could literally change everything for me and Lily." I felt that familiar knot tighten in my stomach, but I kept my voice even. "Oh, that sounds wonderful. What is it?" She launched into a breathless monologue, a cascade of buzzwords that I, a retired history teacher, could barely follow. She talked about scaling her brand, monetizing her platform, and leveraging her equity. It was a language designed to sound impressive while communicating very little. I managed to cut through the jargon. "So, what is the opportunity? Exactly?" "It's an exclusive retreat for female entrepreneurs in California," she said, her voice dropping into a conspiratorial whisper as if she were sharing a state secret. "It's invitation only. They connect you with venture capitalists, with major brands. It's the big leagues. Mom. But to go, I need to show I have a viable business plan and the capital to back it up. I need to professionalize everything, hire a web developer, a real photographer, invest in some actual inventory for a product line. I stood on my back porch, the green watering can dangling from my hand, the scent of damp earth and blooming roses filling the air. The beautiful, peaceful setting was a stark contrast to the anxiety coiling inside me. And that requires? She took a deep breath. I need $50,000. The number hung in the air, obscene and terrifying. $50,000. It wasn't a request for rent money or a new tablet. It was a significant portion of the nest egg I had carefully built over 40 years of teaching. The money, my financial advisor said, would ensure I could live comfortably without ever being a burden to anyone. I sank onto the wicker porch swing, which let out a mournful creak. Jessica, that's a lot of money. I know it's a lot, she said, her voice losing some of its bubbly quality, replaced by a harder, more insistent edge. But it's an investment in your daughter, in your granddaughter's future. Think of the life I could give Lily, the stability, the opportunities. This is our one shot. My mind was racing, trying to find the right words. The responsible, maternal part of me wanted to help, but the rational, pragmatic part of me was screaming in alarm. Richard's voice echoed in my head, cold and clear. She sees you as a bank, Carol, not a mother. Honey, I can't just write a check for that amount, I said, my voice softer than I intended. That's a major financial decision. Before I could even consider something like that, I would need to see a formal business plan. We would need to sit down with my financial advisor, Mr. Henderson, and go over everything. The silence on the other end of the line was instantaneous and absolute. It was so total I thought the call had dropped. Jessica? I asked tentatively. When she spoke again, her voice was unrecognizable. The sunny influencer was gone, replaced by someone cold and sharp, someone whose voice was honed to a razor's edge. A financial advisor? She said, the words dripping with contempt. You mean you need to ask a stranger for permission to help your own family? Someone who is paid to tell you to say no? That's not what I mean, I stammered, feeling the conversation slipping away from me, spiraling into a dark place I hadn't seen coming. It's a responsible thing to do. For both of us. Responsible. She spat the word out like it was poison. I'll tell you what's not responsible. Having a father who treats his love like a transaction, who dangles money and security in front of you your whole life, and then snatches it away because you didn't become the person he wanted you to be. My blood ran cold. My hand gripping the phone started to tremble. This has nothing to do with your father. It has everything to do with him. Her voice rose, cracking with a raw, stored-up fury that stunned me. And you just stood by and let him do it. You never stood up for me. You never fought for me. And now, you're being just like him. The accusation struck me with the force of a physical blow. I couldn't breathe. My carefully tended garden, my peaceful sanctuary, suddenly felt like a cage. She wasn't finished. Her words were deliberate now, each one a perfectly aimed dart. If it weren't for my father, my daughter's life would have been different. I won't let you do to Lily what he did to me. There it was, the threat I had subconsciously feared for years, now spoken aloud. My relationship with Lily, the one pure and uncomplicated love in my life, was now a hostage. My granddaughter was a pawn in a game I didn't even know I was playing. It wasn't a request for money anymore. It was blackmail of the soul. How dare you say that to me? My voice was a choked whisper. I'm just telling you the truth, Mom, she said, her voice now eerily calm. The dispassionate tone of someone who has just delivered a killing blow. Think about it. The choice is yours. And then she hung up. I sat on the porch swing for a long time, the phone still pressed to my ear, listening to the dead air, The sun dipped below the trees, casting long, menacing shadows across the lawn. The air grew cool, raising goosebumps on my arms. The ticking of the grandfather clock from inside the house sounded like a bomb counting down. Just like him. The words echoed in the terrifying silence of my mind. Just like Richard. I thought of his controlling nature, his conditional affection, the way he made his own daughter feel worthless. And Jessica had just laid all of that at my feet. The pain was dizzying. A nauseating mix of shock, fear, and a profound, soul-deep confusion that left me questioning every decision, every memory, every part of the woman I thought I was. The fracture wasn't just in our relationship, it was in my very identity. And I was terrified it was too deep to ever be repaired. The days that followed that phone call were the longest of my life. Sleep offered no escape. I'd wake in the pre-dawn stillness with Jessica's words ringing in my ears. A venomous echo in the quiet of my bedroom. You're being just like him. The accusation had rooted itself in my soul. A toxic seed of doubt that sprouted in the darkness, making me question 40 years of motherhood. I'd wander through my home, the place that had always been my sanctuary, and see only ghosts. There was the armchair where I'd rocked a feverish 7-year-old Jessica through the night, the scuff mark on the kitchen wall from her first tricycle. Were all those memories a lie? Was I the villain in my own daughter's story all along? I didn't hear from Jessica. Not a text. Not a call. The silence was a suffocating, tactical thing. It was a punishment, and I had no idea how to earn a reprieve. My only hope was Thursday. Our ritual. Surely. She wouldn't break our ritual. Surely. The simple, uncomplicated love between a grandmother and her granddaughter could mend this chasm. That Thursday. My hands trembled as I baked the snickerdoodles. I measured the flour and cinnamon with painstaking precision, as if getting the recipe exactly right could somehow reset the universe, could turn back the clock to a week ago when my world still made sense. When I pulled up to the school, I saw Lily standing near the flagpole, separate from her usual group of chattering friends. She was staring at her shoes, her shoulders slumped. My heart ached for her. She didn't run to the car as she usually did. She walked slowly, deliberately, and slid into the passenger seat without a word, her backpack a shield on her lap. The usual explosion of stories about her day, about art class, about who she sat with at lunch, was replaced by a silence so heavy it felt like a physical weight. "Hi, sweetie," I said, trying to inject a cheerfulness into my voice that I didn't feel. "How was your day?" She shrugged, her eyes fixed on the tablet in her hands. "Fine. I made your favorite cookies. They're still warm," I offered. A desperate peace offering. "Okay." We drove the 10 minutes to my house in that thick, unnatural quiet. The only sound was the tinny music from her tablet. When we got inside, the warm scent of cinnamon and sugar did nothing to thaw the iciness between us. She dropped her backpack by the door and immediately sank into the big armchair, her face illuminated by the blue glow of the screen. "Don't you want a cookie?" "Bug?" I asked, holding out a plate. "I'm not hungry," she mumbled, not looking up. I left the plate on the coffee table and retreated to the living room floor where the memory box project lay untouched. "I found that picture of your mom at her first dance," I said, my voice sounding thin and reedy. "I thought we could add it to the box." Lily looked up from her tablet, and for the first time, her eyes met mine. They were flat, devoid of their usual sparkle. "Mommy says looking at the past makes people sad." The words, so clearly not her own, struck me with a fresh wave of pain. It was a direct quote, a line rehearsed and delivered. The poison was working. "Sometimes," I said gently. "The past is what makes us who we are." She looked away, a flicker of something confusion, guilt, crossing her face before it was gone. "My friend Ashley is going to Disney World for fall break," she said, her voice suddenly taking on a whiny, resentful tone that was pure Jessica. Her grandma is paying for it. Mommy says we probably can't even go to the beach this year. She says her business is having trouble because some people aren't supportive of family. There it was. The script. The emotional knife. Twisted by the small, innocent hand I loved more than anything. I felt the blood drain from my face. I had no words. No defense against a hurt so perfectly engineered. The remaining 2 hours of our time together passed in that same, agonizing silence. When Jessica's SUV pulled into the driveway, I felt a strange mix of crushing disappointment and profound relief. The second blow came the following Monday. Tucked between a seed catalog and a letter from my alumni association was a crisp, windowed envelope from Park Avenue Management Corp. My heart hammered against my ribs as I tore it open. The language was cold, corporate, and brutal. It was a formal notice of default for Jessica's apartment. 2 months of unpaid rent. The letter informed me that as the co-signer, I was now fully liable for the $4,800 balance, plus late fees. If the amount was not paid within 10 business days, eviction proceedings would begin, and the default would be reported to all 3 major credit bureaus, impacting my credit score. I stumbled to the kitchen table, the letter shaking in my hand. 45 years. I had worked for 45 years and had never once missed a payment on anything. My perfect credit, the quiet pride I took in my financial responsibility, was about to be shattered because my daughter was using it as a weapon. I immediately called her. It went straight to voicemail. I sent a text, my thumbs fumbling on the screen. I got a letter from your landlord. We need to talk immediately. Minutes later, a reply bubble appeared. Can't talk. In a meeting? I typed back, my anger overriding my pain. They are threatening to ruin my credit. How could you let this happen? Her reply was instant and utterly devoid of remorse. I can't pay rent if I don't have a business. Mom, the money has to come from somewhere. You made your choice. I stared at the screen, at the cold, blue and gray bubbles that represented the complete demolition of my family. She was blaming me. She had deliberately defaulted, knowing full well the consequence would fall on me. As another turn of the screw, another way to punish me for saying no. The final, quietest cut came the next Wednesday evening. My phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. Change of plans for tomorrow. Don't bother picking Lily up from school. We're busy. Busy doing what? I typed back, my heart pounding. Is everything okay? There was no reply. And just like that, my Thursdays were gone. My connection to Lily, severed with a casual, cruel text message. I stood in my silent kitchen, the snickerdoodle recipe still on the counter from a week ago, the half-finished memory box in the living room. The poison had not just spread, it had conquered. It had seeped into every corner of my life, turning my sanctuary into a prison of grief and my most cherished love into a source of unbearable pain. And a new, terrifying thought began to form in the wreckage of my heartbreak. This was not the end of her campaign. It was just the beginning. The 2 weeks that followed were a masterclass in psychological torture. My home, once a sanctuary, became a waiting room of grief. I'd marked the passage of time by the Thursdays I no longer had. The silence was absolute. No calls, no texts, not even an angry email. It was as if Jessica and Lily had been erased from my life, and the only evidence they ever existed was the gaping, painful hole they'd left behind. I found myself engaging in the pathetic rituals of the abandoned, driving the long way home just to pass Lily's school at dismissal, hoping for a glimpse, scrolling through Jessica's Instagram feed, searching for a new picture of my granddaughter among the endless photos of artisanal coffee and sponsored handbags. I saw a picture of Lily at the park, smiling, holding a ridiculously large ice cream cone. The caption read, "My whole world, making the best memories, no matter what." The subtext was a dagger aimed directly at me. We don't need you. We are happy without you. Each like on that photo felt like a public vote in favor of my erasure. I was being systematically excised from my own family. And the world was applauding. Then, on a Friday night, my phone lit up with a text. It was from Jessica. My heart did a painful lurch. Mom, I know things are tense. I think we need to talk. I'm worried about you being all alone in that big house. Can I come over tomorrow morning? Just us. The message was a masterwork of manipulation. A perfectly crafted olive branch hiding a thorn. It wasn't an apology, but it was an opening. It feigned concern. And my starved, desperate heart devoured it whole. Hope, that stubborn, foolish weed, began to sprout in the barren ground of my despair. Maybe she regrets it, I thought. Maybe she realizes she went too far. I typed back before I could second-guess myself. Yes, of course. 10 a.m. would be lovely. The next morning, I was a bundle of nervous energy. I tidied up the already immaculate house. I put out a plate of lemon poppy seed muffins, and I rehearsed opening lines in my head. At precisely 10 a.m., the doorbell rang. I took a deep, steadying breath and pulled open the door. A hopeful smile already forming on my lips. The smile died instantly. Jessica was standing on my porch, but she was not alone. Beside her was a man in his late 40s, dressed in a suit that was just a little too shiny. He had a practiced, predatory smile and was holding a sleek leather briefcase. My entire body went on high alert. "Mom," Jessica said, her voice bright and breezy, completely ignoring the shock on my face. "This is a friend of mine, Mr. Davies. He's an elder care financial planner. I was telling him about my situation, about our situation, and he offered to come and chat. Isn't that nice of him?" It felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. This wasn't a reconciliation. This was an ambush. I thought it was just going to be us," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Oh, don't be silly," Jessica laughed. A sharp, artificial sound. She brushed past me into the foyer, forcing me to step aside. "Mr. Father, Davies is here to help. We're all on the same team." Trapped by the unspoken rules of civility, I led them into my living room, the same room where Lily and I had sorted through memories just a few weeks before. The space felt instantly contaminated by the man's presence. He sat on my sofa, placing his briefcase on the coffee table with a soft, ominous click. "Mrs. Peterson," he began, his voice smooth as oil. "Jessica has told me what a wonderfully independent and prudent woman you are. She's just concerned, as any loving daughter would be, that managing everything on your own might become a burden." "I'm managing just fine," I said, my hands clasped tightly in my lap. Of course, he said with a condescending nod. "But as we get older, finances can become so complex. Market fluctuations, tax laws, it's a full-time job. Jessica and I were talking about a way to simplify things for you, to give you peace of mind." Jessica leaned forward, her face a perfect mask of loving concern. "That's all I want for you, Mom. Peace of mind. For you to be able to relax and enjoy your retirement without worrying about all this stuff." I watched them, a perfectly synchronized team, the concerned daughter and the kind professional. It was a disgusting, beautifully rehearsed performance. My grief was being replaced by something else, something cold and hard and clear. Mr. Davies opened his briefcase. "What we often recommend in these situations," he said, pulling out a sheaf of papers, "is a durable power of attorney." The words hit the air with the finality of a judge's gavel. He slid the documents across the coffee table. I saw the bold letters at the top of the page. I saw the line where my signature was supposed to go, and the line below it, where Jessica's name was already neatly printed as the designated agent. And in that moment, the fog of my heartbreak finally burned away. I saw everything with a terrifying, absolute clarity. This was never about a business investment. This wasn't about her father. It was about this. It was about gaining control of every penny I had. The request for $50,000 wasn't the main attack. It was the opening salvo designed to make me seem unreasonable. The default on the lease was a tactic to apply pressure. Cutting me off from Lily was the emotional leverage to break my will. A strange calm settled over me. The trembling in my hands stopped. The lump in my throat dissolved. It was the calm of a person who has already lost everything and has nothing left to be afraid of. I looked at Jessica, truly looked at her, and saw not my daughter, but a stranger. A cold, calculating stranger. "No," I said. My voice didn't waver. It was quiet, but it filled the room. Mr. Davies's smile tightened. "Mrs. Land. Peterson. Perhaps you don't understand." "Oh, I understand perfectly," I said, standing up. My gaze was fixed on Jessica. "I understand that you demanded $50,000. I understand that when I said no, you deliberately defaulted on a lease I co-signed for. I understand that you have forbidden me from seeing my own granddaughter. And I understand that you have brought this man into my home to try and trick me into signing away control of my entire life." Jessica's face flushed a blotchy, angry red. The mask of concern had shattered. "You're being paranoid. Mom, we're trying to help you." "Help me?" The laugh that escaped my lips was a harsh, bitter sound I didn't recognize. "You are not here to help me. You are here to take from me. This meeting is over." I pointed toward the front door. "Get out. Both of you. Get out of my house." Mr. Davies, flustered for the first time, began stuffing the papers back into his briefcase. Jessica stood up, her eyes blazing with a hatred so pure it was almost stunning. "You will regret this," she hissed. "The only thing I regret," I said, my voice like ice, "is not seeing this sooner." I stood ramrod straight as they walked out, not moving until I heard the front door slam shut. The silence that rushed back in was different now. It was not the silence of grief or loneliness. It was the silence of a battlefield after the first bloody skirmish. I looked at the indentation on my sofa where the man had sat, a dark stain on the fabric of my life. The heartbreak hadn't vanished, but it had been forged into something new. Righteous anger. And in the quiet of my violated home, I knew this wasn't just a family feud anymore. It was a war. And I had just survived the first invasion. After the front door slammed shut, the silence that followed was different. It wasn't the heavy, grief-stricken silence of the past few weeks. It was a ringing, electric silence, the kind that follows a lightning strike. The air in my living room still felt tainted by their presence, by the cloying scent of Mr. Davies's cologne and the metallic tang of betrayal. For a moment, I stood frozen in the center of the room, my body a statue of cold fury. Then, I began to move. My actions were methodical, almost robotic. I walked to the kitchen, took out my best cleaning spray, and returned to the living room. I wiped down the coffee table where the power of attorney documents had rested. I plumped the couch cushion where the predator had sat. I opened the windows wide, letting the crisp autumn air chase out the last remnants of their visit. It was a futile gesture. I knew. You couldn't wipe away a violation like that. But the simple act of cleaning, of imposing order on my own space, felt like the first act of defiance. With my house physically cleansed, I made a cup of tea, my hands surprisingly steady. The shock had burned away the weakness, leaving something hard and resilient in its place. I sat at my kitchen table, but instead of replaying Jessica's cruel words, I was replaying her strategy, her cold, calculated moves. It wasn't a fit of anger, it was a campaign. And you don't weather a campaign by crying. You fight it by building fortifications. I knew I couldn't do it alone. There was only one person I could call. Diane, my best friend for over 30 years. Picked up on the second ring. "Carol? You sound strange. Is everything okay?" The dam of my composure broke. But it wasn't a flood of tears. It was a flood of words, a torrent of facts. I told her everything. From the $50,000 demand, to the default notice, to the horrifying ambush in my living room just an hour before. I laid it all out, my voice flat and emotionless, like a witness giving testimony. When I finished, Diane was silent for a moment. Then she said, her voice a low growl, "That man, Davies. I'm going to look him up. I bet his license has more complaints than a hornet's nest." She paused. "Carol, listen to me. This isn't just Jessica being a brat. This isn't a family spat. This is elder financial abuse. That's the name for it. They came into your home to try and defraud you. What your daughter did today is predatory." Hearing her give it a name, a real, legal, ugly name, was a profound validation. It cut through the lingering guilt and confusion. I wasn't a bad mother being paranoid. I was a target. "You cannot handle this on your own anymore," Diane continued, her voice firm. "You can't fix this with motherly love, because that's the very thing she is using against you. You need a lawyer. A shark. I know a guy. His name is Evans. He handled my cousin's nasty divorce. He's calm. He's smart. And he does not mess around. I'm sending you his number right now." The next Monday morning, I walked into the law offices of Evans & Associates. The contrast to my recent experience was immediate. The office was quiet, professional, and felt safe. The receptionist was kind. The coffee wasn't stale. "Mr. Sit." Evans himself was a man in his 50s, with gentle eyes and a reassuringly calm demeanor. He didn't rush me. He simply sat, listened, and took notes as I recounted my story for the second time. This time, it was even more concise, more factual. When I was done, he folded his hands on his large oak desk. "Carol," he said, and the simple act of using my first name felt like a gesture of respect. "First, I want you to know that I believe you. Second, what you've described is, as your friend correctly identified, a classic pattern of coercive financial exploitation. And it is escalating. We need to act immediately, not just to prepare for her next move, but to prevent it." For the first time in months, I felt a sliver of hope. I wasn't just reacting to the chaos, I was about to get ahead of it. "Here is what we are going to do," he said, his voice a steady anchor in my storm. "This afternoon, you and I are going to your bank. We are going to put password protection on all your accounts and set up alerts for any transaction over $100. We will make it so no one can access your funds without you being physically present," he continued, laying out the battle plan. "Next, we are going to draft a new will and a new durable power of attorney. We will name a trusted executor, your friend Diane, perhaps, and we will specifically and legally revoke any prior documents. We will make your wishes ironclad." He leaned forward slightly. "And this is the most important part. You are going to buy a notebook. A simple, spiral notebook. In it, you will document everything. Every text message she sends you. Save it. Every time a strange car parks across your street for an hour. Write it down. If she tries to call you from an unknown number, log the time and date. From this moment on, you are building a case. Your memory is no longer just your memory, it is evidence." Finally, he delivered the hardest instruction. "And you will cease all direct communication with your daughter. From now on, I am your voice. If she needs to contact you, she can do it through my office. This is non-negotiable. It protects you from her manipulation." I walked out of his office an hour later feeling different. The heartbreak was still there. A deep, resonant ache for the daughter I had lost and the granddaughter who had been stolen from me. But the fear, the crippling confusion that was gone, it had been replaced by a cold, clear sense of purpose. That afternoon, I went to the office supply store. I walked past the colorful, floral journals and chose a plain, black, hardcover notebook and a pack of fine-tipped black pens. I took them home and sat at my kitchen table. The silence of the house no longer felt empty or threatening. It felt still. It felt ready. I opened the notebook to the first page. At the top, I wrote the date. My hand was perfectly steady. My first entry was a detailed account of the ambush with Jessica and Mr. Davies. I wrote down the time, the words they used, the documents they presented, the way they made me feel. The tears that had been my constant companions for weeks were gone. My mind was sharp. For the first time in a very long time, I wasn't a mother grieving her child's love. I was a woman documenting an attack. I was a soldier, sharpening my sword. And I was preparing for the war to come. The month of October settled over Charlotte, bringing with it a deceptive beauty. The leaves on my old oak tree turned to brilliant shades of crimson and gold, and the air grew crisp and clean. From the outside, my life looked peaceful. I had established a new, disciplined routine. Every morning, I'd make my tea and write in the plain, black journal. Every afternoon, I'd tend to my garden. I followed Mr. Evans's instructions to the letter. My finances were locked down tighter than Fort Knox. My new will was signed, witnessed, and filed. The silence from Jessica was complete, and a small, foolish part of me began to hope that my fortifications had worked, that she had hit the wall of my resolve and retreated. It was a quiet, fragile peace, and I should have known it wouldn't last. The desperate don't simply retreat, they find a new line of attack. I imagine she discovered the wall I'd built on a Tuesday. Perhaps she was at a boutique, trying to buy another overpriced handbag to maintain her flawless online image. And the credit card I had been quietly paying off for years was declined. Or perhaps she called my bank, trying to charm some hapless teller into giving her information, only to be met with a polite but firm refusal due to new security protocols. I can picture the fury on her face, the dawning realization that the ATM was permanently closed. Her source of easy, consequence-free money was gone, and her carefully curated world was about to implode. A cornered animal is the most dangerous, and my daughter, cornered by her own irresponsibility, was about to launch an attack so vicious, so profoundly cruel, that it would eclipse everything that had come before it. The attack came on a Wednesday, during that quiet lull in the afternoon when the neighborhood is sleepy and still. The phone rang, and the caller ID displayed a number I knew by heart. Northwood Elementary School. My first thought was that Lily was sick. A wave of maternal panic washed over me. "This is Carol Peterson," I answered, my voice tight with anxiety. "Mrs. Round. Peterson. This is Principal Thompson." The voice on the other end was professional, measured, but held an undercurrent of discomfort. "I'm calling about your granddaughter, Lily. Is she all right?" I asked, gripping the phone. "Physically, yes. She's fine. She's in class," he said. "However, I'm calling because, well, Mrs. Peterson, Lily's mother, Jessica, contacted the school this morning. She has raised some serious concerns." The air in my kitchen grew thin and cold. I leaned against the counter for support. "Concerns? What kind of concerns?" Principal Thompson cleared his throat. It was the sound of a man forced to navigate a minefield he didn't create. "She has reported a pattern of what she describes as erratic and emotionally unstable behavior on your part. She expressed concern that you are creating a potentially toxic environment for Lily during your time with her." The words were so absurd, so completely detached from reality, that I almost laughed. But the cold, bureaucratic tone in his voice stopped me. He was taking this seriously. Jessica had not just called me, she had called an official, an authority figure. She was creating a public record of lies. "That is completely untrue," I said, my voice trembling with a sudden, sickening rage. "My daughter and I are having a disagreement, but it has nothing to do with my ability to care for Lily. I love my granddaughter more than anything. I understand this is difficult to hear," he said, his tone softening slightly but remaining firm. But Jessica has also made a formal report to the county's Child Protective Services. She has informed them, and us, of your recent, and she has formally requested that all contact between you and Lily be supervised. Child Protective Services. The name itself was a weapon, designed to strike terror and shame into the heart of any parent or grandparent. My daughter had invoked the power of the state against me. She had taken our private pain and twisted it into a public accusation of the most monstrous kind. She was trying to have me branded, officially, as a danger to the child I adored. Mrs. Peterson. The principal's voice cut through my horrified paralysis. I'm sure you understand that the school must take any such report with the utmost seriousness, per district policy, until this matter is formally investigated and resolved by the authorities. I have no choice but to suspend your visitation and pick up privileges. Jessica will be the sole emergency contact and the only approved guardian for school-related activities. I'm very sorry. The finality in his voice was absolute. With a few carefully chosen lies, Jessica had succeeded where the power of attorney had failed. She had severed my connection to Lily completely, using the very system designed to protect children as her instrument of cruelty. After the call ended, I stood in my kitchen, the phone receiver still clutched in my hand. My heart was a frantic, trapped bird beating against my ribs. Desperation, raw and primal, clawed at my throat. I broke Mr. Evans's rule. I had to. I dialed Jessica's number. It rang once, then went to voicemail. I sent a text, a flurry of frantic words. Jessica. The school called me. How could you do this? This is a lie. You are hurting Lily. Please. Call me. A minute later, a single, chilling text came back. I'm doing what I have to do to protect my daughter from an unstable influence. Get help. The outrage was a physical force. It surged through me. A white-hot fire that burned away the desperation, leaving behind something harder, something lethal. This was no longer about money. This wasn't even about respect. This was an attempt to destroy my character, to annihilate my name, to poison my legacy in my granddaughter's mind forever. I called Mr. Evans, my voice shaking with a rage so profound it was almost calm. I relayed the conversation with the principal and Jessica's final text. He was quiet for a long moment when I finished. Then he said, his own voice tight with controlled anger, "Okay, Carol. She's done it. She has officially overplayed her hand." "What do we do?" I whispered, feeling the last of my strength begin to fray. "She thinks she's backed you into a corner. She thinks you'll capitulate and give her what she wants to make this go away," he said, his voice hardening with strategic resolve. "But she's made a critical error. She has created a public record of her maliciousness. This isn't about your stability anymore. It's about her fitness as a mother. This is a desperate, reckless move, Carol, and we are going to use it to burn her to the ground." I hung up the phone and walked to the living room window, looking out at the beautiful, indifferent autumn day. My lowest point had arrived. I was publicly shamed, cut off from my granddaughter, and accused of being a monster. But as I stared out at the dying leaves, I felt no more tears. The fire of my outrage had forged my heartbreak into a weapon. This fight was no longer about defending myself. It was about rescuing a little girl from a mother who would use her own child as a pawn in a game of extortion. The battle lines had been drawn. Now, it was time for the war. The 3 months leading up to the court date were a blur of legal preparations and quiet, agonizing waiting. The world outside my windows turned from the vibrant hues of autumn to the stark, skeletal gray of winter. It was a fitting backdrop for the state of my life. My journal, the plain black notebook, was now nearly full, a meticulous chronicle of my own heartbreak, filled with dates, times, and screenshots of Jessica's cruel, sporadic texts. Mr. Evans called it our Book of Truth. I called it the autopsy of my family. The morning of the hearing, I woke before dawn. A brittle, cold sun was just beginning to bleach the dark sky. I chose my outfit with the care of a soldier dressing for battle, a simple navy blue dress, a string of my mother's pearls, and sensible, low heels. Every piece was a statement. I am stable. I am respectable. I am not the woman my daughter claims I am. Diane drove me to the courthouse. She didn't chatter nervously. She just placed a reassuring hand on my arm as we walked up the cold stone steps. The building itself was designed to intimidate. All marble floors and soaring ceilings that echoed with the ghosts of 1,000 other family tragedies. As we waited on a hard wooden bench outside the courtroom, Jessica and her lawyer rounded the corner. She saw me, and for a fleeting second, her stride faltered. Then, her expression hardened into a mask of cold pity. She was dressed in a severe black suit, her hair pulled back tightly. The picture of a concerned, grieving daughter. She didn't speak to me. She didn't have to. Her look said everything. You did this to yourself. You forced my hand. I met her gaze and held it, my expression unreadable. The time for pleading was over. Inside, the courtroom was smaller than I'd imagined, which only intensified the claustrophobic tension. We sat at our respective tables, a no-man's land of worn carpet between us. It felt less like a hearing and more like a formal declaration of war. Jessica's lawyer, a man with a silver tongue and a shark's smile, began. He painted a masterful picture of me as a lonely, aging woman whose grief and bitterness over her divorce had curdled into a controlling paranoid obsession. He twisted my every action into a symptom of my supposed decline. Securing my finances was a sudden, irrational cutting off of a loving family. Hiring Mr. Evans was a sign of being easily manipulated by outside influences. My refusal to speak directly with Jessica was a hostile withdrawal from those trying to help. Then, Jessica took the stand. Her performance was breathtaking. Tears welled in her eyes as she described her terrifying visit with Mr. Kant. Davies. I was just so worried, she sobbed, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. Her behavior was so erratic. I thought she was being scammed. I brought a professional to the house to help protect her. And she flew into a rage. She threw us out. I've never seen her like that. It wasn't my mother. She spoke of her call to the school as the agonizing decision of a mother forced to protect her child from a beloved but unwell grandparent. I sat there, listening to the fiction she was weaving, and I felt a strange, detached calm. The woman she was describing wasn't me. It was a character, a villain created to serve her narrative. Then it was Mr. Evans's turn to cross-examine. He rose slowly, his demeanor gentle, almost scholarly. Ms. Peterson, he began, his voice soft. You testified that you were concerned your mother was being scammed. Is that correct? Yes, absolutely, Jessica said, her voice trembling with conviction. And your solution was to have her sign a durable power of attorney, granting you full control over all her assets, Jessica faltered. It was to help her manage things. I see, Mr. Evans said, making a note. Now, regarding your financial situation at the time, is it true that you had recently requested $50,000 from your mother, a request she had declined? We had a conversation about a business investment. Yes. And is it true? He continued, his voice still gentle, that you were 2 months in arrears on the apartment for which your mother had co-signed the lease? Jessica's lawyer stood. Objection. Your Honor. Relevance? Mr. Evans said, turning to the judge. The plaintiff has attempted to paint a picture of selfless concern. I believe her financial desperation at the time is directly relevant to her motives. Objection overruled, the judge said, her eyes fixed on Jessica. Answer the question. Ms. Peterson. I was having some temporary cash flow issues, Jessica mumbled. her composure beginning to fray. Mr. Evans pressed on, his questions calm and precise. He established the timeline, the money request, the refusal, the lease default, the power of attorney ambush, and finally, the call to the school. Then, he approached the bench. Your Honor, the plaintiff has testified that her call to the school was born of a genuine fear for her daughter's well-being, based on her mother's unstable behavior. At this time, the defense would like to submit into evidence the defendant's subpoenaed text message records from the evening of that call. A palpable shift occurred in the room. I saw Jessica's back stiffen. Her lawyer leaned in and whispered something to her. His own confident smirk gone. A large monitor was turned to face the judge and the witness stand. Mr. Evans clicked a button, and a string of text messages appeared on the screen, time-stamped and clear. They were from Jessica to a friend. Mr. Evans read them aloud, his voice devoid of emotion. At 8:15 p.m. You wrote to a Ms. Angela Vance, tried everything. The old woman is a stone wall. She's locked down her accounts. Is that correct, Ms. Peterson? Jessica stared at the screen, her face ashen. She said nothing. And then, Mr. Evans continued. At 8:17 p.m., you sent a follow-up message. Could you please read for the court what you wrote next? The courtroom was utterly silent. Jessica's eyes were wide with panic. The judge leaned forward. Ms. Peterson, you are directed to read the text message aloud. Jessica's voice was a choked, strangled whisper. She couldn't speak. Allow me, Mr. Evans said, his voice ringing out in the quiet room. You wrote, the old woman cut me off. I'll have to get the courts to declare her senile if I ever want to see a dime. Might as well use the kid to do it. The words hung in the air. An indictment so absolute, so damning, that there was no defense against them. A collective gasp rippled through the small gallery. Jessica's lawyer slumped back in his chair, his face a mask of defeat. I finally allowed myself to look at my daughter. The mask of the victim was gone. The cold fury was gone. All that was left was the terrified, ruined face of a person whose soul had been laid bare for the world to see. I felt a single, hot tear slide down my cheek. It wasn't a tear of joy. It was a tear of profound, bottomless grief. I had won. The reckoning had come. But as I looked at my daughter's face, I realized it felt nothing like a victory. It felt like an autopsy. The judge, a woman with sharp, intelligent eyes that had seen everything, did not hide her contempt. She looked down from the bench, not at me, but directly at Jessica. Her voice was cold and clear, cutting through the stunned silence of the courtroom. Ms. Rightney for theirself. Peterson, she said. This court has been presented with a petition regarding grandparent visitation. What it has found, however, is a deeply disturbing pattern of emotional manipulation, financial coercion, and parental alienation. You have not only lied under oath, you have weaponized your own child and misused a system designed to protect the vulnerable, all in the service of a transparent and malicious attempt to extort money from your mother. It is one of the most egregious abuses of familial trust this court has seen. Every word was a nail in the coffin of Jessica's lies. She sat shrunken in her chair, a collapsed star of a woman, unable to meet the judge's gaze. The final ruling was swift and absolute. I was granted immediate, unsupervised visitation rights with Lily every other weekend. The judge ordered Jessica to enroll in mandatory family counseling, alone, as the bailiff called the next case. Our time was over. I stood up, and my gaze met Jessica's one last time across the courtroom. There was nothing left in her eyes, no anger, no remorse, just a vast, hollow emptiness. We were strangers. The final, irreparable break had been made. 6 months later, the spring sun streamed through the large sliding glass door of my new apartment. I had sold the house. The sale was a final, cathartic act of liberation, a shedding of a skin that contained as many painful ghosts as it did happy memories. My new home was smaller, brighter, and looked out over the city skyline instead of a suburban lawn. It smelled of fresh paint and my own future. The walls were filled not with old family photos, but with the clumsy, colorful canvases from the painting class I'd joined. The plain black journal was tucked away in a box, its purpose served. My life was my own now, in a way it hadn't been for decades. I had breakfast with the ladies from my yoga class. I volunteered at the city library twice a week, and I was saving for a trip to Italy. A dream I had deferred for 40 years. I was living, not just providing. My weekends with Lily became the new sacred ritual. Our time was different now, quieter, more intentional. There was no talk of her mother, no mention of the court case. We were carefully, cautiously, rebuilding a bridge across a chasm of pain. Last Saturday, I took her to the botanical gardens. As we stood in the warm, humid air of the orchid conservatory, she took my hand. Her own was small but felt surprisingly strong. "Grandma," she said, looking at a vibrant, impossibly delicate bloom, "is it hard for them to grow?" "Sweetie," I said, squeezing her hand, "anything truly beautiful takes a lot of work. And sometimes you have to pull out all the weeds so they have enough light to bloom." She was quiet for a moment, then looked up at me, her eyes clear and thoughtful in a way I hadn't seen for a long, long time. "I get that," she said. In that simple moment, I felt a profound sense of hope. The damage Jessica had done was deep, but Lily's spirit, like a resilient flower, was pushing its way back toward the sun. That evening, after I dropped her off, I sat on my new balcony, a cup of tea warming my hands as I watched the city lights begin to twinkle. The ache for the family I had lost, the family I thought I had, will likely never disappear completely. It is a phantom limb, a part of my history, but the bitterness is gone, replaced by a quiet, steady peace. I had learned the hardest lesson of my life, that some family ties are not lifelines, but anchors, and that true freedom isn't about having a perfect life, but about having the courage to let go of a broken one and build a new, beautiful garden all on your own. Wishing you all peace and strength.